Hello and welcome to the Cubicle Liberation Podcast. I'm here today with Joshua Fletcher. How you doing today, Fletch?
I'm good. I'm excited about this topic today. Maps is such a huge topic in the online space. You've got a lot put together here that I'm excited to hear.
Yeah, and I'm David Hood, and I'm here to talk to you about our top 3 tips for ranking in Google Maps in 2020 and beyond. So let's start by looking at why this is important. And because I do think that some people still don't focus on this very much, when I think it is very appropriate. Basically, for almost any sort of local business, local search, you're going to want maps. I think they've put maps in more searches now than they did 5 to 7 years ago, like kind of here on the right. But you'll also notice that the maps and the ads take up more space. I still think most people skip over the ads, just kind of they mentally file it away and just go straight to the organic. Google's trying to make some more money on their ads. But the point here is that there's less space for you to rank kind of above the fold with the initial screen that people see. And it's almost always for, like, I bet you just about every plumber search that has a maps, and it's at the top. There's not going to be any organic results above it. And so in terms of making money for a local business, or if it's a client of yours, your own business or a local business that you're servicing, this is going to be absolutely crucial. And I think Google really likes this. And so I think going forward, this is here to stay. And if not, it'd be more important over time. Would you agree with that, Fletch?
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually there's some news recently. There's kind of a new head of Google search, and he comes out of the ad world, right? He came out of the advertising side of Google just last week. So I don't think that it's going to swing back the other direction anytime soon. So yeah, I think what your point is very astute and relevant, and also something I don't see reversing anytime soon.
And even if you look at this, like if you look at this Google My Business listing, if I click on this, and I'm still on the Google platform, they're still potentially collecting ad revenue from me in their main revenue producing machine, which is the search engine results pages. If over here I click on this dentistyellowbook.com, then I'm off their platform. And so they make more money with, it's not just about the ads here. It's also about, when you click through further in here, you're still on their platform. It's not just also the ads. They're also gathering more data. They can gather data better on their own properties, which they make money on, long-term and short-term, right?
Yeah.
And also I think that the transition to more mobile is also a factor here in terms of on your mobile device. Look at this right here. This is an ad. I mean, you have to scroll down to even see the first maps results here. And here, again, you don't see any non-ads maps results. This was scrolling down essentially to get to this point. So to me, when it comes from making money, like there's just more maps traffic available when their maps is in the search results. There are some searches where they don't have maps. So this has been a huge focus of mine over the last couple of years. I've done a lot of testing on it. There's so many different things that can be done. I won't claim to understand it all or know all the techniques, but I know a lot. And I generally feel like I've got a pretty good handle on some of the big picture stuff and also some of the specific techniques, which we will try to go over some in this podcast. Any more comments on sort of like the kind of the big picture trends with regards to maps?
Yeah, I think it's, just the proliferation of everyone having a mobile device and now having bandwidth to use it. And those also many of them being smartphones that have GPS enabled. Maps is going to continue to be displayed prominently in search results for a long time.
Yeah. And I mean, I think part of it is that users react positively to it. Because it influences their decisions heavily for certain types of services and products. And so Google will give the users what they're looking for.
Well, and you brought something up on it just really quickly. I don't know if you're going to go into it more, but you talk about that, if you click in a maps result, Google, you're still on Google's platform, right? The more they control that frame, they've been sued already about ranking YouTube above other video like some things like that. So it's kind of almost obvious that they do, but at the same time, the more Google can keep a visitor, somebody that's, you know, a human that's doing search activities on their platform, the better off they are. And so by using maps like this, it pushes down everybody else's website, who would then, once you're on those other websites, Google does not have the same advantages over you as you do when you're on google.com doing a search.
Yep. I mean, and ultimately Google is a company that is
Yep.
trying to make money. And I think 95% of their money comes from the ads on search engine results pages, not the ads on other people's sites that you see, those ads specifically. So yeah, they make more money. They're heavily incentivized to keep you on their platform as long as possible. Maps aren't just going to disappear. Maybe they'll change a little bit. I would be surprised if it wasn't a little bit different 5 years from now in at least some ways, maybe even significantly different, but there will be some sort of maps related stuff. I can pretty much guarantee it. Okay. So the first kind of tip is to, I would say, more like kind of like understanding what it really means to rank in Google Maps. And the idea here is that you don't rank like the same. It used to be like up here at the top right here, like if you were in Burbank looking for a dentist, and really anywhere in Burbank, this 7-pack would look very similar. It wouldn't change a whole lot depending on your location. Now, where you search from can dramatically affect the results. And here's an example of sort of like a really huge ranking GeoGrid. And this is actually really, really good. These are 3 miles apart. So this is I guess this is a 13 by 13, so 39 by 39 mile grid. And I think this is actually really great. This is one of my listings. And so this works really well, but this is more of an accurate representation of, do I rank number 1? Yeah, I do in a lot of places, but some places I don't. And I can show some other examples. I'm going to pull up, Flesh, can you talk about Keyhole? Because you have some insight onto this that I wasn't aware of while I pull up this other grid.
Yeah. So my background, I guess, one of the things I did in graduate school was a graduate program in geographic information systems. At that time, Keyhole was a platform that we had an institutional license to get at their data and their technology and all that kind of stuff. While I was at ASU, this was like maybe circa like 2000, give or take. So 20 years ago. So that, pardon me, that company is essentially the data and the technology that Google Maps and Google Earth were both built upon. So Google purchased Keyhole, and I did a little background research as we were talking, as we got warmed up for this. It turns out that the CIA was involved with that purchase for some reason. I don't know, NSA contracts and all that kind of thing. But anyway, so
be
Keyhole,
careful. We don't want to get shut down here.
I don't want blacklisting or anything else. So I'm just, I'm reporting what I read on someone else's website. Anyway, the technology that drove that was technology and data that we used for geographic statistics. They're called geostatistics. And so when I then, 15, 18 years later almost, got into like Google Maps and started poking around and understanding kind of how that worked, I was like, oh, this is geostatistics. This is something called inverse distance weighted. So what it does is it helps you understand what's going to be what's going to influence your ranking the most, right? So if you're going to say, okay, I'm standing at this location and I want to know what where I should get a burger, right? A cheeseburger. Okay. Well, there's things that come into play, like what's your budget, so to speak, meaning how far are you willing to drive? Maybe you're willing to walk or drive for half an hour, right? And so all of those things come into play, and those wind up being attached to the ranking factors, right? And there's a bunch of ranking factors, and David's going to get into some of those as well and some of the strategies. But those ranking factors really don't change a lot. Really what changes when we say the algorithm in Maps changed is they change the weighting on those variables, like what your budget tends to be, how far you're willing to drive, how influenceable is the power of your website, is a page on your website about the thing that's being looked for, even though it's not in Google My Business. All of those are kind of the factors that come into play. And so it's kind of fun for me to kind of geek out a little bit and understand the actual math and science behind maps. When I got into it, I was like, oh, I see now. So now I just need to figure out what these factors are, right? And how they're weighted. And the weighting does change, just like an algorithm change does. It's you call it an algorithm, but it's a much simpler mathematical formula that requires actually more computing power to do, because you've got the geographic data that's in there as well. So yeah, there's my little weird geek out.
No, that's relevant. I think kind of this is actually really crucial to understanding how to rank. If you don't understand what it means to rank, and then you can't really understand how all the other things that we're going to talk about, or a lot of them are not going to be super relevant. So here,
well, and what you shared with this map, this is exactly okay. So why would that happen, right? And understanding how this works lets you understand these maps, right? So
and
how to more about them, and
how to make them better.
Yes.
So here's a more common example. This top one here, where the center of this is like where the Google My Business page is located. And so they have a number one there, which actually sometimes, if you've got a really new one or a really crappy one, it's not going to even have that. But in this case, so there's a few places where it ranks number one, and pretty rapidly it loses its influence. So this one has kind of a very small sphere of influence. This is my listing again down here, but instead of on a 3 miles per dot, it's a 1 mile. So it's a 13 by 13 mile grid. I have a lot of number ones. This one kind of random number 2 here. And so that's obviously really good. This is much less common. This is much more common than what you see. I mean, just going, this is on 1 mile. So they go 2 miles to the west and they rank 6th from number 1 to number 6. And so understanding that this is how the kind of distribution of what ranking looks like. Now, proximity is not, and location is not the only factor that goes into this, because Google does like to, they stated a long time ago, they would like to personalize results. There are other things. I think you can get different results depending on the time of day, depending on the device you're on, and stuff like that. But in general, I think proximity right now is not so much proximity, but proximity relevance is a better way of putting it. It is probably the biggest factor once you meet certain other thresholds.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that?
Completely agree. Yeah, that proximity relevance, whatever language you're going to use, if those terms kind of mean sort of that type of thing, that's exactly how the math is going to bear out. Like you talked about, like there's going to be things that influence it. Like if a business is open, Google's not necessarily going to rank it if you're looking for a cheeseburger and you're not open.
Yep.
Right. So there's a lot that comes into play that come with just understanding a good result that Google would want to show in that map, whether it's close, whether it's seems to be trusted, meaning it's got information that seems very relevant to what the person's looking for, whether it's open, what its reviews might be, that's why all these things come into play. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to move on to kind of the number 2 tip. So now that you understand, not that you necessarily understand, but just getting an inkling of kind of what.
We lost your screen share just now, David.
Yeah, I know. Okay. I'm switching over.
No, I was just making sure that you knew. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So the number 2 tip is to build your proximity influence, or maybe your proximity relevance influence. I think proximity influence works. So you're trying to make it so that you're more relevant to a wider area of the map, so to speak. And do this with, there's kind of a high level concept that there's so many different ways to go about using it, but by making my business or my Google My Business more relevant to POIs, which are points of interest. And a point of interest can be all sorts of different things. A point of interest can be a neighborhood. It can be a suburb. It can be a museum. It can be just about anything that shows up on a map and has sort of like map data behind it. You could just go to Google Maps and look around in an area that you want to rank for. So if we go back to that other one, so in this case right here, so the one place where I don't rank like really super great is kind of in downtown. So what I could do is I could look at, this is kind of uptown too, could look at what are some major places in this area, find one and build relevance, build proximity relevance to that location. Yeah, build relevance to that, a point of interest in that location. Anything to add to that, Fletch?
No, that's it. That's, we chatted a little bit about that. And so when I see, like when you see difference, period, right? We see difference here. We got a bunch of ones and then there's a 4. It's like, okay, let's drill in here and understand what that difference was caused by. And so that's kind of like meta wise, like stepping back and kind of, what is this whole thing about? And this is how to think properly. This is how to understand properly and to see distinctions, right? And so one of the things that I find interesting is that from where David's actual location is, he drops to 4 in a very small location and then back up to 3 and then 2 even further away. So that means that there's a factor right in that kind of Knox-Henderson area that doesn't have a lot of geospatial influence, but locally has something that David's not able to overcome with the current configuration of how the website is.
Yeah. Let's actually, I'm going to skip over. I'm going to be switching between.
I know it's a little, I steered us in a a direction there.
No, you didn't. No, you steered it exactly where I wanted to go.
Okay.
And because I think that's really useful. And so like, if we zoom in here, so this is where I don't rank particularly well, like kind of like
Highland Park area.
Yeah. Like there was this highway was it was kind of like just south of this highway, if I'm going back to it, and all the way down into sort of like this area right here. So what I could do, okay, here's the Dallas Museum of Art. I could create content or relevance to Dallas Museum of Art, because that's kind of also a unique property. I wouldn't pick like a McDonald's probably. I could do this Museum of Art, or I could zoom in here.
Well, now that one geometric. What was that one? That actually sounded like it was actually about like geometric and mod. Okay, never mind. Okay, I saw geometric and I was like, oh, we're talking about geostatistics. Does this have something to do with it?
Yeah. Here's another really interesting tip. It's a really expensive tip, but I think it could give you tons and tons of relevance. If you could, like, for some of these places, maybe not as much the Dallas Museum of Art because they're so big, but become a sponsor of them and maybe get a link from them. So you're getting a link from a place that is highly relevant, and that is going to increase your geo relevance to downtown. I did have one in a downtown place that I don't have anymore. Dallas Country Club. Maybe you could sponsor the Dallas Country Club. We have the Meadows Museum. There's a university around here, SMU. Yes. I could create relevance to all of these. There's this park. I guess that's a country club.
And that's kind of a higher end residential area. A lot of it. There's a lot of money in that part of town. I used to live in Dallas, so I kind of know a little bit about this area.
Yeah. Here's some parks. And then sometimes, like, you can see if you zoom in at just the right levels, like Turtle Creek, that's a neighborhood. I believe they're going to list that as a neighborhood. Yeah, it's a neighborhood. And so you can find other neighborhoods. And there's all sorts of different ways to go about doing this. So there's kind of almost no limit to the amount of different types of POIs and point of interest that you can do.
Yeah, those points of interest, one of the ways people could think about doing those, depending on what you're doing, right? We have agencies, marketing agencies, is the use of photos, right? Photos that are geotagged, meaning that the location's built into them, right? Where that picture was taken from. And this is one of the reasons I brought this up. And this, I haven't talked to David explicitly about this, but the crossover between Google Earth and Google Maps can have, it has an effect on Google Maps rankings. So if you've got photos that are geo-referenced in Google Earth, right? That's like kind of more of like the street view type things, and maybe a photo of a famous place that you've taken, submitted to Google Earth that came from that, or is originally hosted on your either Google My Business or your website. Those things can have an influence there as well. And that's why I wanted to mention, like we talk about ranking in Google Maps, but Google Maps and Google Earth are very much driven by the same technology, and they share a lot of data. Yep.
Yeah, no, that's there's so many different ways. Yeah, the photos and what
That's what we
maybe
talked about. There's like, we could each give 10 things. They could neither one overlap at all, and they'd
yeah.
all be right. There's just a lot of different ways of looking at this from a kind of tactical
But
perspective.
I think that like building your proximity influence is going to be a centerpiece in just
Yep.
about all of them
Yep.
right now. And so like the photo thing. So you could also go take a photo of that location that you want to go take a photo of that museum and then post it on the website of that you want to rank, and that'll add relevance to it. So it'll be geotagged. It'll be, with your smartphone, or you could manually geotag it. You can make a post inside the Google My Business page with that as well. You can make with a link building. You can use it in link building. So I'm referencing this other stuff down here. So you can build proximities influence to POIs and all the different normal SEO places. And it's a lot of people think Maps SEO is just kind of all about, especially like new clients that don't really know a whole lot. It's all about the Google My Business page and just optimizing that. And there is some optimization there, but there's actually a lot of stuff that you can do, especially on the site, to kind of tie things together. There's so many different things, like creating a page about the Dallas Museum of Art. I should probably do that on my Dallas SEO Geek thing, and then do some other stuff to it, and see where it goes from there. So I can get some more influence in the downtown area. Although I'm not complaining too much, because there's still a lot of financial interests all around this map. I'm still very happy. This is really, really good in my opinion. So, and it is interesting what Fletch pointed out. Like, there's a transition from 1 to 4. Why is that? Like, what's going on there? And maybe that'll help me understand what I need to do.
Well, and then the thing, it's not just the 1 to 4, but then it's like the further away you get, then you go back up to 2.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, okay, well, like why aren't the 3 people ahead of you at that location ranking, like their influence spatially is less than yours?
Yes.
And so there, like, this is how you can reverse engineer and pull apart and understand what these factors are. Like if David goes on this website and checks this out, and they've got tons of local photos, right? But that's really all they've done. They don't have any pages on their website. You could start inferring, oh, well, that's going to certainly displace somebody else, but it's not, it's going to be very localized. It's not going to have like the circle you draw around it as far as how much it influences is not going to be a very large circle.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's so many different ways to go about this. Okay, so build your proximity influence. Okay. Also, I would say the third and final tip is to build your brand influence. And I think this one is well, there's definitely thresholds in the other stuff we're talking about. This one is definitely more about a certain threshold. If your business doesn't have like enough trust in Google's eyes in terms of them believing that you're a real entity, and we're going to go over, like, there's actually a kind of a technical entity term. I'm using entity in more broad sense. If they don't believe you're a real thing, your business is a real thing, or Google My Business at that location is a real thing, then they're not going to rank you like at all, or it's going to be you're going to have very, very little influence. And so, especially with starting out or newer businesses, you're going to need more of this. You're going to need to show Google, hey, we're real. And there's a lot of different ways to go about doing that. Fletch, tell me what you know about like how Google treats entities and how important you think it is to this process.
Well, it's really big across the board, right? Regular organic listings as well as maps really comes into play. Just like you said, it's one of the ways Google establishes if you're over that threshold, you're a legitimate business. And if you're a legitimate business, it can be, Google has, I say, easier time. I'm anthropomorphizing. Like I'm kind of like, Google doesn't really like sit there and like, I trust that person, right? It's
Right.
just math.
It's an
But if
effect,
you're,
but that's the effective result.
the effective result is similar
Yeah.
to that. So it's like, oh yeah, they've got a website. It's put together well. It's linked to a Google My Business. It's got social media around it. They've done some things maybe with some markup language and some schema to help me understand the nature of, oh, that's my Facebook, that's my YouTube, that's my Google My Business. It's now an established entity, right? So the effect of that entity, and the reason this is very relevant to maps, is exactly what David was talking about. it's not just what you do with Google My Business. It's what you do on your website as well. So we can, from that, directly infer that that there are things you do to rank a map that you're not doing on Google My Business, which is the thing that ranks, right? So this is kind of the nature of like links and stuff like that. The context is very important. And that context is specifically going to come back to the concept of an entity. So the entity does include the website, does include other social media platforms. It does include like a YouTube channel, right? If you've got a YouTube channel that's really rocking and rolling, those are things that are going to be influential to rank a GMB, Google My Business, in maps for these types of things. So establishing that entity, you've got to create the stuff first, right? You got to have a website. It's got to be crawlable and understandable to Google, right? We've talked about other SEO factors, but just having it be understandable, right? Understanding what those SEO factors are is big. And then what Dave was talking about, including concepts in that website that refer to areas you want to rank in maps for. So even though you might not do anything on Google My Business specifically to gain ranking, you're doing something on your website. That'll help your website rank, but a lot of times, not always, right? This is not a one-to-one relationship, but a lot of times if we see a really solid organic listing, it's going to be paired with a maps listing that ranks well also.
Sorry, my wife is calling me repeatedly.
Oh, you got an emergency? I can
No.
No. Usually after the second phone call, I'm like, oh boy, somebody's bleeding. We're heading to the emergency room or something.
Yeah, I got a text, and I won't mention what it is because
Gotcha.
it's just not not appropriate. So I missed what was the last thing you said. So please feel free to.
I was just talking about the context being important, right? Not all the things that you do to rank a Google My Business are on Google My Business. Actually, a lot of them are off. They're in the website, they're in the YouTube, they're in the social media.
Yep. Yeah. And some examples of this are what people call, used to be ranking the maps was all about getting citations. Citations are more part, I think, of this part of establishing your entity and showing a certain threshold of this is a real business. And then also like branded traffic. If people are searching for your brand, that is helpful because that is kind of more of what a real business would have. Also people interacting with your brand. So actually traffic coming to your website or traffic interacting with your Google My Business page. These are all going to be part of establishing your entity. Fletch mentioned your YouTube channel, people watching your YouTube videos. Again, that's establishing your entity. And this is something that isn't going to probably happen overnight, especially if it's a business that you just started your business and you verify it and you set up your website kind of all at the same time. This is going to take some time. I also think that this would sort of like classical SEO stuff. So like if your website has a lot of authority in terms of it has like a lot of good quality links going to it, that's going to give your entity more influence, or it's going to be more established than if your website has no links.
Yeah, I look at this entity stuff like kind of like lubrication, right? So it's like if you've got all the technical stuff in place and you've got a really established entity, it helps kind of lubricate its way up to the top of the ranking, right? It's also, I got David laughing, so that's all fun too.
It's also like if you saw the picture
that you had in your mind, I don't.
Well, no, the picture that my wife sent me that I don't want to mention.
See, somehow or another, I was on the same wavelength, evidently.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah, sort of.
This lubrication, so it's not going to get you all the way there necessarily, but it's going to.
It actually doesn't probably impart any momentum. But if the momentum's there, if the technical stuff is in the place, it needs to be. So will entity help you get ranked more quickly? Yes, if you're doing the right stuff.
So do you have any ideas?
Without entity, it may take you 7 months to go build a brand new site and start to get solid rankings organically, or maybe in maps, it takes 5 months, right? If you've got entity established you may have shaved off a month or 6 weeks off of both of those time frames.
So how would you go about establishing an entity? Just real quick at a high level.
Oh, it's high level. Everything's going to be consistently named. So like search explosions, Facebook is going to be search explosion. It's YouTube is going to be search explosion. It's Google My Business is going to say search explosion. So consistency across those different things, and just keep it at 4, but we build more than that. The other thing with entity that I do is I set up webmaster tools or search console. I install that on the website. Analytics, Google Analytics, I install on the website, confirm that, validate that. We include schema that has a property in schema, which is schema.org. Schema is a more generic term that just means that's kind of how you work with databases. We use a property called sameAs in there. Whether it has a huge influence or not, we use it. It's a tool that Google is a partner in. I assume using it is going to be helpful to Google. There's no reason for them to spend money on a project that they're not at least paying attention to. Those are kind of the main things. What was that? Maybe 4 or 5 things that you can do.
Yeah.
That's really, you might need to poke around and see how to implement this, but you could do that on your own. Yeah.
Like, yeah, there's so many different ways to go about this. Just think about like another business that's well established, and what kind of footprint they're going to have online, and try to do your best to mimic that footprint as best you can. That's going to be, and you don't have to do everything. And
I love YouTube channels because why? It's Google's property. You got a rocking YouTube channel. You're posting content there that's getting watched. Google's like, hey, well, he's helping us make money.
Yeah.
Let's continue to, like, we can work well together, kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, I'm a big fan of YouTube. This is a whole other conversation, I think. Like the engagement, it's the most engaging form of content.
Oh, I swear I go there a lot for like how-to tutorial videos. And then 3 hours later, I'm like, well, now I understand about, tortoise migration and everything else that I needed to know when I came here. But it's very, oh man, it's like, that's a whole different story. I've got a book called like, it's engineering, so to speak, with addiction and how these, like they're addiction engineers.
Yeah, no, they are,
especially on all of these platforms, and YouTube's are some of the best in the world, as far as I can tell.
Don't
Vegas.
Let your kids have unfettered access to YouTube.
Yeah, that is a whole day can go away really fast.
I mean, like from a brain standpoint, it is just as bad as drugs. I mean, and I'm not saying that like in a silly way. I'm saying that in a very serious way.
Yeah.
Like they are become addicted to it. And I mean, there's lots of, it's not just YouTube. It's kind of all the kind of the digital stuff, like smartphones and stuff like that. So
yeah,
but you're right. They're addiction engineers. Yep. I mean, their job is to get you on there and keep you on there as long as possible so they can serve as much ads.
Yeah. It's like a flavor engineer for food. It's like, why do we need this to taste that way? Well, because it hijacks your brain. Makes you want more.
Right, exactly.
That's exactly why. You need to sell this
everything
product, right?
is about.
Yeah.
All about the brain.
Pulling back the curtain on things.
Well, that's what we got. I think that's a pretty quick one, but hopefully that's pretty helpful to you if you're struggling ranking with maps. I mean, this isn't the end all be all, but if you really work on these 3 things, really the first one is more of just a point of understanding, and if you get that, you can move on. And if you have something newer, then making sure you build your brand influence. And then after that, it's mostly this number 2 one. Build your proximity influence. Just keep doing that over and over again, along with the normal SEO stuff, which is, I think you do want to continue to build your brand influence. I think that does help. Like it does help with other non-maps SEO stuff. And just overall, it helps over a long period of time, and you get a lot of benefit from that. But in terms of like specific strategies, most of the time it's directly related to the proximity influence. So,
agreed.
Any final words? No,
I think we're gonna. We spent some time last week kind of going through a lot of topics that we can cover, kind of in a little chunkier. Like here's more like a how-to. Let's explore this one kind of technical topic. And this was the first one we've kind of kicked off since doing that. So if you guys, you know, kind of like this style and this type of content, you know, you have comments turned on the
There's
page.
so many different places where they can see this.
Yeah.
So if you're on YouTube, then yeah, you
comment,
can definitely make a comment.
like,
Yes.
subscribe, share.
Yeah. Do all that stuff.
All that stuff that's going to get us more, you know, it's going to lubricate our brand more, but but we do pay attention to that stuff as well. So yeah, if you like this kind of thing, we've got a lot more of this kind of planned out that I'm really excited to be a part of.
You could also find us on Facebook. And Fletch has a group called Fat Path to Success.
Yep.
And I have a Facebook group called Operation Day Job Liberation. And so you can join those groups and send a message in there. You can try to personal message us. I can't speak for Fletch. So, you know, I typically will try to get to that. I can't guarantee you that I will always be able to get to it, but I will actually try to respond if you have some feedback on this or you have some specific questions.
I try as well. There's so much that gets filtered because if it comes from someone I'm not already a friend with, it gets in this one folder, and then there's like, you know, 150 messages there from people that aren't really people and in various states of undress. Comes a place I don't go very often.
Click to check out my pictures. I'm a real person.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's how you send me money.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Have a good day. Bye.